Morning and pleasure being here this morning. And compliments to Rajesh, MSA, and the team for putting together a very grand event. Like they said, this is the sixth one. I recall attending the first one and the events thereafter. My suggestion to Rajesh is start preparing the Kallur Stadium. Next year should be the venue, should be the Kallur Stadium. And as Federal Bank, we are obviously pleased and proud that this is the third year we are the presenting sponsor. And Rajesh said I'm a hard negotiator. I actually think the con in the TiECON is their capability to convince me that we should actually invest in it. Normally we're quite stingy about investing, but I'm pleased that we've had the opportunity to work with this group of people who really mean and want to make a difference. And I'm certain that as a bank that is a rich history here, our participation both benefits us and for sure we will be able to support some of the initiatives. So on that count, we heard Mr. Dr. Tharoor speak so eloquently. It's a hard act to follow. I'm not even going to try to match up to what he said, but I think I'll try and give you some sense of how I see, how we in the banking industry see, and not specific to any particular theme in Kerala or startup in general, but around what's happening in the environment and how I see what may be characteristics that are going to define success, geography or location agnostic, because we live in so many so diverse, so many challenging both opportunities and challenges right in front of us. In fact, if you look around now, the words like change, big data, artificial intelligence, autonomous cars, robotics, these are all sort of regularly used in virtually every business daily. In fact, it's become part of our daily lingo in life. And these have some profound implications. Some we recognize, some we don't even recognize. And if you zoom into Kerala, what I think Dr. Tharoor spoke about, remittances being important, the challenges in the Gulf having its own implications on the state, the global demand for software or IT services being sort of softish, these produce a new ecosystem. One, there is a period of profound change that is happening. Second is some structural changes both in the Middle East, which are going to permanently alter how life conducts, not only in the Middle East, what happens to businesses or people based in and around Kerala are all, I think, have large long-term implications. Now, each of this calls for both investments, behavioral change, and deeper organizational reform that is going to try and ensure that we weather these storms or maybe success or navigate or live more competently or more effectively in this period. Now, if I sort of look at banking, which is an industry I've been part of for a long time, and look at how the last 3 decades have played out, and you can sort of break it into different time zones. If you take decade 1, 2, 3, we've recognized that each decade something structural, something fundamentally shifting. But the important point in all these things is that timelines are shrinking. If I take the last 5 years and if I look at what has happened in the banking industry, and if I told you that your bank branch is now the 79th organ that is in you, you may be thinking that I'm smoking something illegal. But the truth is, this has become your branch. And this was not even true 3 to 5 years back. And to my mind, this is just a trailer. What is changing, what can change, what is happening is just so enormous, and the power of technology is beginning to fundamentally reshape how lives are conducted, irrespective of social strata, age, income. These become less and less relevant, but fundamental changes are happening, which is being absorbed. And often, it's not by some business manual that comes and instructs it, it is just intuitive. It is just, we are all absorbing it, almost not recognizing or not realizing that the change is coming upon us. And these are very significant in a time slice that if you look at how the next 3, 5, 10 years is going to play out, and in the context of what the theme for this year's TiECON is about, fostering entrepreneurship, making Kerala a material part of that play, and inviting businesses to come in here, the scope changes. It doesn't have to be the traditional, conventional models that we've always visualized. The platform to play is beginning to change quite substantively. At the bank, we've chosen a theme, but sort of our guiding principle, if you will, is about digital at the fore and human at the core. And I think equal emphasis on digital and human is our theme. I'll dwell less on the human part because that's the nature of who we are, but try and look at the digital aspect and see what's happening and how it's informing how we do business, how we as a bank are reshaping ourselves. But a month or two back, I'd asked the team to try and look at the life cycle of a customer of the bank, irrespective of the segment, and look how it's changed over the last 3 to 5 years. What came across is that if you map the customer from the time they are born to us, or rather we onboard the customer to the time they either sort of mature or move out or become an NPA, whatever, the number of touch points that a customer life cycle has with the bank, the number of participants who work with us, our partners who work with us, is now 30 to 35 partners work. 3 to 5 years back, it was almost zero. Therefore, there is a fundamental shift in how business is conducted. It cannot just be standalone, it becomes collaborative. Now, if I dive down into the 30, 35 partners, 3 to 5 years back, most of them didn't exist as a business. So it's evident that these are startups, these are new ventures that are beginning to engage, sort of enshrine themselves into how a bank, which has more legacy processes, is actually conducting business. Now, if I dive deeper into that, of these 30, 35, almost 50% of them are from in and around Kerala. Now, there's a message in this, that an ecosystem starts mushrooming around every opportunity, and sometimes we recognize the opportunity, sometimes we don't recognize the opportunity, but it's actually beginning to mushroom, and we must foster that. So to foster that, we set up what we call launchpad centers, one of which is in Cochin, and we also set up a startup fund. We're probably one of the few banks which set up a startup fund, and I'm quite pleased that over the last year and a half, yes, there are, being a bank, we need to be on occasions more conservative than just being very courageous, but equally we are mindful of the fact that good ideas cannot be canned. So it's a fine balance that we try to strike between supporting ventures which are more substantive, which has a stake by the people who are coming into it. So one thought that was born as we got into this journey of trying to support startups, support ventures which are coming up across the nation or across the geographies we represent, we said we must try and understand by looking. We have a bank that is one of our sort of stated vision is to be the most admired bank, digitally enabled, for small, medium and micro establishments. I repeat, our aspiration is to be the most admired, digitally enabled bank for small, medium and micro establishments across our geographies. So it occurred to us that for years, and this is nothing new, for years, maybe 60, 70, as long as we've been alive, our customers have largely been either self-employed businessmen, small, medium establishments. We said we must try and understand if there are core characteristics that define good businesses other than just pure financials, because we all know that particularly small businesses struggle to get financials that are very easy for banks to look and lend. So we are now learning, and it's an ongoing process, but we are trying to understand what defines successful businesses, successful businessmen. I think Rajesh or MSA spoke about there are no failed entrepreneurs, there are only failed enterprises. And I think learning from that, we sort of analyze, and this is a very crude analysis, one can argue how right, how justified, but it's very instructive for us to conduct business. We said we must look at the range of customers we've had for many, many years and try to understand what are characteristics. So my friends at TiE often tell me that I use acronyms to tell my story, so I'll try and do that today also with using, I won't sort of disappoint them. I'll try to take a stab at giving you my study of this through just a few acronyms, and then I'll bring my address to a close. When we looked at this range of customers across time, across geography, there are 3-4 themes that emerged. And the first theme that came up is something about genuine and grounded. We looked at customers of ours and non-customers who've sort of stood across time, have weathered storms, have lived through, where the ideas are not just flaky, are not fads. The idea and the entrepreneur is sinking himself into it, he's putting his personal stake in it, he's taking his life. And that's a feature that is very predominant. It's not about which business, which geography, which time zone, which horizon, all that becomes subservient to the theme of is he staking his life? Is he putting his all into it? And I think there's a big message. I mean, we have Mr. Azad Moopan here, who is probably one of the finest examples of probably starting from somewhere and got to the point we are just by the fact that they've staked their life and staked everything. And more fundamental, there's an authenticity, there's a genuinity about what they're doing. So the first thought was around genuine and grounded. So the message I would share is pursue value and not valuations. And I think the valuations follow the value. So the first sort of pair of ideas is around genuine and grounded. The second theme, and these are not that they were all applicable to all the analysis we did, but the second theme or the second thought process that emerged was around, are they continuously wanting to stay relevant, and are they supporting that by repurposing, reinvention? And again, if you look at relevance is such a dominant theme of businesses. We have numerous examples in-house, wherever you turn, and the famous ones are Kodak doesn't exist or Nokia doesn't exist, and I'm sure each of you have remarkable examples of what existed then and what doesn't exist now. But if you zoom into our own country and just take banking in India, if you take the last 10 years or the last 5 years, you've seen a sharp segregation, so to say, of what is traditionally the bastion of banks was the public sector banks, which enjoyed more than 75-80% share of the Indian banking system. They're fast losing that share. While private sector banks, whether it's banks like us, which had a sort of a rich past but struggled our way through, or the more swift and new generation banks, are gaining share quite materially. Now, these are not by accident. I think there is a fundamental issue of making an effort to stay relevant, making an effort to stay continuously reinvent, and make sure that the business models are more suited to the shifting times, the trends are being read, and you're participating in the opportunities, or importantly, creating the opportunity which your customer probably didn't even realize, or creating the need and serving it. So I think the themes, as you can see, is around genuine and grounded, around repurposing and relevance. The third, we live in a world of big data, so we analyze a lot of data. All of us, there's an information overload. We get, sort of truckloads of information coming to us, and we are often snowed under it. But I think the ability to distill information and connect dots and thereby form insights is what is making or reshaping or making more people more successful. If you take just some of the businesses which have maybe come up in the last 3 to 5 years, I can think of a Make My Trip or a Book My Show or a Byju's or, pick any. All of them have zoomed in on an insight and have made their business model rich enough to address that insight. Can there be copies? Can there be Me Too's? Can there be challenges? Of course there can be. But the fundamental point they've made is a deep appreciation of insight by cutting through a lot of noise and made intuition something which is sort of ingrained, and therefore it supports the insight. So I think the third theme or third sort of idea would be around intuition and insight. And the last theme, if you will, is around, you look around, we've all almost shy away thinking that tradition has no longer a room for anything. I'm arguing that tradition backed by technology is actually an emerging theme. I'm personally beginning to believe that investing into tradition backed by technology is going to redefine how every business is going to be conducted. You look around, you'll find so many what was traditionally considered out of fashion is coming back in a big way. Who would have thought that kabaddi would be now a watched sport by people in the elite class? Indian Kabaddi League. I can give you 100 examples of how tradition is re-emerging, and businesses, Patanjali is a remarkable case of giving the levers and the Procter & Gamble's a hard time. Now all this is pointing to the fact that tradition backed or wrapped with technology or wrapped differently is reappearing. I mean, the whole Pallanguri game is now a sort of center stage game. I mean, there are any number of examples that we can all construct, and each of you would have more sort of vibrant examples of it. But my short point is, in our study, we discovered these fundamental themes of genuine and grounded, reinvention and relevance, trying to be intuition backed by insight, and lastly, technology backed by tradition or wrapped by tradition, are beginning to sort of come together. And no surprise, the first four alphabets are G, R, I, and T, which is grit. And I am convinced, as many of you would have been, there was a beautiful WhatsApp video of a TED talk by a lady called Angela, I'm not sure of her name, which you've not seen it, I would urge you to see it. She's a psychologist who went to do a deep analysis and came back with a fundamental theme. Across time, across categories, across lifespans, the constant factor that distinguishes between success and failure, or remarkable success and less success, is the ability to stay the course, stay grounded, and have grit. And I think our study of our own portfolio of entrepreneurs, businessmen, environment seems to suggest and reinforce that theme. So I'll close by saying our message is grit. Let's stay gritty and wish our friends in TiECON a wonderful conference. Have a great one. Thank you so much.